You know?
Wow.
There is a distinction between a child and a servant.
A servant is only as good as what he's producing for the master.
As the value of his production.
That's
exactly right.
Wow. Say that again, Joe.
A servant is only good as what he's producing. In other words, as long as you're a benefit to the household and to the owner, or to the master, you're going to stick around. But you start messing up, and you mess up considerably, he's going to say, "See ya," because he has no tie to you. He has no blood tie to you. Whereas, of my 5 children, there were days when I was not real happy with them, but there was never a day that I didn't love them, and there was never, ever a time when I said, "You're no longer my son," or "You're no longer my daughter," right? You might feel like that on occasions, but the reality is like, no, I mean, they're bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh.
Exactly.
Wow. Wow.
And that being the case, because God has chosen to call us son rather than servant, He has specified that He has a relationship with us that is of a permanent kind, that is not determined by what we do for Him. It's determined by who we are in Him.
Right.
We are His sons. We have His identity in the world. We are His identity in the world when we are the sons of God. We are the body of the only begotten, also called the firstborn. We are the body of the firstborn. There's not multiple bodies of the firstborn. The sons of God are the body of the firstborn and are found in the firstborn. God has really sewn Himself into a corner, if you want to look at it that way. He has built a structure in which He is utterly and absolutely committed that the welfare of His name, the reputation, His very reputation, is passed into the hands of frail, flimsy, corruptible men.
Wow.
But it's His determination to do that. And then to so love us as to extract from us the promise of our love for Him, so that we become, over time, we become aware of that, of the depth and extent of that relationship, and we can grow up.
That's good, Corey.
And learn to represent our Father accurately. In the 23rd Psalm, so many people know the 23rd Psalm. In the 3rd verse it says, He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. I pondered over that a lot, and I think basically you can paraphrase it this way. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of His reputation. He does not intend that I remain what I was when He picked me up along the way. His intention is that I grow up so that I can carry His reputation without staining His reputation. And He has entrusted His reputation to us for that purpose.
That's good. You about to say something, Joe?
Well, I was just saying, it occurs to me that God prefers a troublesome son to an excellent servant. Okay? And in fact, I can say in my own life, ways back, and I've seen it in many people's lives, that when people come to Him and relate to Him as a servant, okay, because He only sees them as sons, okay, He will ruin you, if He has to get you to stop serving and realize you're a son. In other words, countless people know the cycle of, accepting the Lord and being filled and everything, and then they get involved in this, that, this, and next thing you know, 3 years down the road, they totally burn out. And it's not that they weren't doing good things, and that, but in their heart was, I need to do this to serve God so that He'll love me, and that's nonsense. And He has to break us of thinking that way. And if there's nobody that comes along and communicates us about our sonship, I've seen Him do it in people's lives. He will, basically, let you run out of strength and grace and everything else, so that you kind of just, what happened, so that He can kind of like, son.
And once we get hold of the fact that we really are sons, and that it's not required that we earn something in that context, then anything the Lord presents for us to do becomes the joy of a fellowship with Him, as opposed to a labor for Him.
Right.
There were things that my father expected from me when I was growing up, but those things were things I needed to know so that when I was grown I could do them.
Right.
it wasn't, and I frequently resented having to do it. I mean, I would rather watch cartoons than mow the grass this morning, that kind of thing, obviously. Most children would have moments of that kind. But he persisted in such a way that when I became a grown man, I understood that the grass needed to be taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't somebody else to do it, and then Judy and I only had daughters, and so there wasn't somebody else to do it. I had developed enough of a sense of responsibility that the things that needed doing got done, but I wasn't earning anything from those things.
Mm-hmm.
There was no earning. It was just simply taking care of things. In our Father's house, in God's house, our Father, we're much more about simply being. His grass doesn't need to be cut. Besides that, he's got hosts upon hosts of servants in the heavenlies.
Mm-hmm.
And all spiritual things that need taken care of can be taken care of. All he's got to do is simply say so, and it'll be done. But he wanted some sons. He wanted some sons that he could have a relationship with. Do we do things? Yes, we do things. We do things because they pleasure him, though, not because they have to be done.
Right.
We do things because it pleases him that we are pleased to be with him.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that are pleasant for him. And so we speak of the praises of his people being delightful to him. It's not much work in praising him.
Right. One of the things I really took joy in just recently, my son had opportunity to come home from college, and so I asked him to help me out with some of the books because his major is finance, and he's a junior in college, and I told him, I just want you to be able to reconcile some things, and just to see what type of expertise he's already learned from his studies, and so he worked with me for the entire summer, and one of the things I noticed is how much it wasn't about, even though I paid him as I would pay anyone. Mm-hmm. It was just me riding in with him every day, us being together. Mm-hmm. I was so pleased with that. Nothing else really mattered, that I was just with him driving, to a location every day and talking to him and just being able to just do something with him just brought great pleasure to my heart. Yeah. So I can imagine that when you were talking about earning and, it's not about that. One particular, I was trying to explain this to a brother one time, the matter of sonship and being. There was a time where the Lord, I was praying and the Lord told me to believe. He says, don't do anything else. I just want you to spend a year believing. I'm like, how do you spend a year believing? But I noticed that believing helped me. It was being. That's what the believing was. Believing was being. Mm-hmm. So just believe. And that's all he had required of me. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, Lord, I will just believe. And that's just what you're requiring me. And then as I begin to talk to this particular brother, he says, but that's not true, because he mentioned the Apostle Paul. He says, Paul even said, I'm a bondservant of Jesus Christ. Yes. So why is it wrong to be a bondservant or servant? And it wasn't a thing where I was saying it was wrong to be a servant. I'm just differentiating that there is a difference between servant and son. Right. So in the context of Paul mentioning that he was a servant or bondservant of Jesus Christ, how do you feel about that, and what is the reference that you see concerning that scripture? Well,
absolutely. Every suitable son has the heart of a servant. I mean, the Christ himself came because in the relationship with the Father, he was suitably constructed in his psyche to come and be exactly what the Father needed for him to be and expected him to be for us. But Paul's inheritance wasn't in his service, it was still in his sonship. I hope that I'm a suitable servant. The time that we've just had together in this retreat, I hope that I was a suitable servant to the saints in the area, during that time. That the things that I did and said were useful to the saints. Yes. Now, because I am a son of God, it was possible that I would be called to do those kinds of things. That's very reasonable to me. Had I not done them, had I said, well, Lord, I think I won't, it wouldn't really have changed the fact that I'm a son of God.
Right.
Right?
I earned nothing from it in particular. I enjoyed being with the saints. So the work, if you want to call it that, the work of service, Paul speaks of that in Ephesians, for example, the works of service, that the apostles and so forth are sent to train up the saints in works of service. It's not that we don't do anything. It's that the inheritance or the relationship is not in the doing, it's in the being.
Wow.
And the doing will flow out of the being. God will not entrust a work of any kind to a man who's not capable already spiritually of actually undertaking the work. But when God gives a work to a man who is capable of doing that work and is a son of God in his heart, he will enjoy doing the work. It is, and he'll have the heart of a servant, but the service will not be odious to him. It in and of itself will be a joy to him, and he'll be able to present the results of his labor to the Father.
That's good.
Not for hire, not for pay, but here it is, Father, are you pleased?
That's good. Joe, I see you shaking your head over there.
Well, it just occurs to me as Corey was talking, as like two people in a house, doing the same chore, cutting the grass, whatever. One's a son, one's a servant, okay? The son is at rest, even as he's laboring, because there's nothing riding. He wants to do a good job, and hopefully he will do a good job, but there's nothing riding on the relationship between him and his father if he doesn't do a good job. I mean, maybe some correction, okay, but he's at rest. There's no pressure in that sense. The servant, the nature of the relationship is how you render service. So he's anything but at rest because, in other words, the quality of the work that he does, the amount of work that he does, okay, could break the relationship. In other words, if he does really poorly or he goofs off or, he messes up big time and costs the master. I mean, the nature of the relationship, okay, is servant.
Right.
That is the basic cord that ties them together. So there's a whole lot riding on that. He's not at rest in the sense of, there's a lot more riding, even though it's the same task, there's a lot more riding on it for the servant than the son.
Right.
Because he's going to, depending on the temper of his master, he could be, fearful. He could serve excellently but fearfully.
Yeah.
A son never serves fearfully.
The service is the relationship.
Right.
And good service may well result in a love relationship. But in the case of the son, the love relationship preexists the service and supersedes it and is outside of the service. There were probably times when I pleased my father. He was rather quiet about those kind of things. I didn't really know, but I did know when I displeased him. So my guess is mostly I pleased him. But again, as Joe was saying, that had nothing to do with the fact that I was a son per se. It's just that because I was a son, I was the one expected to do those things.
Another example that it just takes it a little bit away, but it shows it. In other words, what's the tangible basis, the baseline of the relationship? You can work in an office, okay, for 20 years, okay, and so you're working with the same people, and you get to know them, and you have lunch, and you have barbecues together, and stuff like that,
Right.
okay.
Right.
The majority, so we'll call that love, okay? You form a love relationship to a degree with the people that you serve, okay? Most people, when they depart from that company, that place that they've worked for 20 years and these people that they've related to every day, within a year and a half to 2 years, will never talk to or see those people again. Because the relationship is a subset of the organization,
Wow.
okay? In the kingdom, it's never that way.
Right.
The primary relationship is the relationship. Everything else is peripheral to that.
Wow. That's a good point, Joe.
And the economy is backwards. Not backwards, but opposites. The relationship with an employer or with employees is an economic relationship. It may be very cordial. You may hug them. You may give them gifts when you don't have to. You may have a lot of concern when something happens in their family. All those things are things a normal person will do. But the relationship itself still is fundamentally economic in nature. Whereas the relationship with the son may or may not have economics associated with it. There may be no economic anything associated in that relationship.